right. You have now been notified per your GDPR requestiness. Who wants to start with our check-in of greatness? Let me give you a link so that you can catch up. So what might need to happen for you to liberate 10 times more with structures? And is there any structure in particular you'd like to get to know better today? So.
Well, maybe I can give it a start. Use 10 times more, that's quite a lot. I would use it quite a bit. But I usually find that experience let me put it this way, experiencing structures that you're unfamiliar with is very helpful in knowing how to host them as well. So if you just try to do a structure from a website, I find it very difficult to really properly facilitate such a structure. So I have noticed that when I've experienced it before, even I don't even need to host it, but just experience it, helps me to facilitate and use them a lot more. That's my experience with it. And the one that I would love to gain more experience with, I think there's actually two, if that's allowed. I don't know if I'm breaking the rules here. Is eco-cycle planning. I've never really done that. And there is this one with, I forgot the name, with the drawings. I don't know which one it is, but
Drawing together, I imagine?
Yeah, drawing together, that one indeed. I also have never done that one, and I'm curious about it. I'm not sure about it, but I'm curious about it to see how that works.
Cool, thank you, Robert. And who would you like to hand the microphone over to?
Well, I would go by invitation, I would say. So I kicked it off and lowered the threshold a little bit to talk. So I don't know who would like to go next.
I'll go next just to cut just so we don't spend time in waiting. So what should happen? One is that the definition of a liberating structure would be softer, not necessarily just whatever is in the book, but whatever liberates structure. And two is to practice more strings and not just isolated structures. And because I take two as well, why not? And for the second question, I don't really care as long as it's not the usual suspects, 1, 2, 4 all and 3, 9, 11, 5, whatever, to do something that I didn't really experience a lot before. But there's so many that I don't care. And I'll tell you who goes next, whoever wants to. Go for it.
I'll go. So in terms of using more liberating structures, I think I would need a larger team that met more often, but we're very efficient, so we don't, and therefore I don't need much to liberate. But that would be helpful and more experience. And the one that I have never done is what I need from you. And I see people get all twisted about it, so I'm kind of curious what makes that one hard.
Righteous, thanks, Elise. And who's next?
Okay, I can go. What needs to happen for me to liberate with more? I think I just need more confidence in understanding how each of them works. And yes, the usual suspects, fair enough, but absolutely, I don't have a deep enough understanding, and I find it difficult on the website to just read through and get the knowledge out of that. So it's really helpful to do practice, more and more practice sessions, so that I can have the confidence to go and build my own. And similarly, I don't have a preference as long as it's something I've probably not done before, or in a combination I've not done before.
Cool, thank you. Anybody else?
Shall I go? I think I don't know, I think it's my turn. So I echo Joelle's thinking, because I kind of more familiar with game storming, other facilitation tools, and not with liberating structures. I'm a really beginner. So they seem okay. I used a few, but I would like to gain more confidence and understand more the process. And actually, whatever the group wants to explore, I like to explore, because every time a tool is actually different. Although you apply it, it differs from the groups when you use it with different groups. So yeah. I don't know, Dap, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, if everyone finished, I just had a thought. This process that we just did is non-liberating, in the sense of, yeah, you see, we have one more guest. So I wonder, how could we liberate this process to get this response faster and in a more resounding voice? But I would love to hear Kate.
Just throw her into the group and immediately on the spot. Kate, what would you need to do to liberate with structures 10 times more? And is there any liberating structure you'd like to learn more about today?
All right. Can you hear me, first of all?
Thumbs
Yes.
up.
Okay, great. Let me try my video. The first thing I'm going to say is that it's 7 a.m. Pacific Coast time right now. So this is what's happening. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take accountability for this. And I think I just need to show up more to make liberating structures 10 times more effective in my practice, which is why I'm here today. And I'm not sure what structure. I'm very new to it, honestly. So I'm not sure what structure I want to learn more for. I know my context and my use case, but I think actually maybe something like wise crowds could be it.
Well, you're
Hey,
in the
are
right
you
place.
like in California or Mexico or something?
I'm in California now, and then I'll move down to Mexico in a bit.
Because I'm on the West Coast too, and the sun's not up yet. So I'm looking at your window and you've got sunlight and I don't. And I was like, how fascinating is that? It's too early still.
Oh, the F is round, right?
It must be coming my way. How cool.
I don't
I
know,
promise.
that's what they want you to
It'll get
believe.
to you.
That's what they want you to believe. Well, thanks for the introduction, everybody. It was a much smaller group when I made the judgment call to go around in the circle, so I'll take that one. Impromptu networking is probably a better way to go about this one to get some more action and juice. But since we're here, I want to invite everybody on the second or third page in the doc that we're working from. So hopefully there's a link for you in the chat, Kate. There is an image for the liberating structure development phases. And what I want to invite everybody to do is to just do a self-assessment about where you're at in that sort of learning journey and put it on the end of your name, just so that we can sort of make explicit what the varying degrees of familiarity we have with liberating structures. So that would be either a cynic if you're super brand new, an optimist if you've got a little bit under your belt, a super user if you're 15 plus structures, and a minimalist if you are the dude. So does that make any sense, what I just said? Who's got question marks?
So where did you want us to put it?
Just put it after your name.
Can I change that somewhere?
Yeah, if you click on the 3 dots on your face.
Oh, there it is. Rename.
And then there is a teeny tiny bit of invitation as well with minimalist, with the recognition of where we're at in these development phases, which is, if you find yourself in the role of cynic, if you're just starting out, then help us by, perhaps challenging the assumption. If you're in the role of optimist, then please help us out by really stepping into the role of asking for clarification and explanation when you're at all confused about where we're going or what is being meant. Don't let us be presumptive. Super users, please stretch yourselves out and answer the questions that you might have a piece of the answer for, but you may not be sure of. And for any minimalists in the house, make space for other people to answer questions and then build on the input of others so that we all have a little bit of a job to help us make the space productive. So with that, we're going to jump into Wise Crowds. Wise Crowds is like Troika, if you guys are familiar, but bigger. It's also on the 3rd or 4th page. We've got a nice little handout. And so one person's going to take in the role of the client and offer some form of help request in the form of a meeting, workshop, or some shared session that they are planning or would like some consultation on. And then they're going to tell us that story for a couple of minutes. The rest of us are going to take on the role of consultants and ask some clarifying questions. And after those clarifying questions, we're going to let Barbara in. And after those clarifying questions, we're just going to have them hide themselves, turn their back on us, metaphorically speaking, and then we're going to consult with the specific invitation of our consultation that of what structures come to mind to help us address this question from the client and how might we string them together. So it's really the intention of this space that we can actually use the design storyboard, which is another liberating structure, to actually help put together a proposal that they might be able to actually use and take action on. So with that being said, does anybody have a case that we can work on today?
Great.
Kate's got it.
Doesn't nobody else?
You're the
All right.
one.
Then, so my case is this. I think several of you might be familiar with it already because I've spoken about it in the Never Done Before space. But so I want to do a series of, self-contained, but a series of workshops centered on different spirits, like for instance, tequila and mezcal or rum. And my challenge is that the goal isn't just to teach people how to taste or teach people about the spirits. It's really about helping participants change their perspective on the spirits by showing them firsthand accounts or really honest photographs of the production process and the people involved, and sharing perspective from the people who are doing the production of the spirits via interviews or such. And so my challenge is, generally speaking, I'm looking for more ways for the participants to change their perspective. So perspective changing exercises or perspective taking exercises, I think. And then a way in the end to wrap it up to land not just, okay, what have we learned about the spirit, but also what have we learned about the way that we as individuals look at products, and how can we change that to be a more empathetic or informed consumer, and then also person in the world.
All right, so let me check and see if I understand what you're sort of putting down, Kate. So we're trying to also, thanks for bringing up the fact that I also didn't explain how we're hoping to get the cases. So what we're looking for is just a min spec on, so what is the sort of place or context? So I understand that you're hosting some form of spirit tasting, and that there's going to be some sort of information being shared about the production of these spirits. And by spirits, you don't mean like woo ghosts, you mean like alcohol. Like, okay, cool. In that the outcome that you've described is around changing perspectives, I think is sort of what you want to get out of this. And then I have a question. The third portion of our min spec for the case is the participants, and or if there's any roles in the participants. So can you help us get to know who we're going to be planning something for?
Sure. Antonio, feel free to jump in here because you've been through it. So the participants probably have maybe a base knowledge of spirits, to maybe some, optimist level knowledge, I would say. And probably if they're showing up to this workshop, they're pretty open-minded. Yeah, what else can I tell you about that? And their roles, I would say, their roles are as learners, and then also they're co-learners. It's a pretty collaborative workshop. And they're going to be open and sharing their preconceived notions about the spirits, and then hopefully reflecting with one another toward the end about what they think at now, if they leave changed at all. Dolph?
Yeah. Is your goal changing the perspective about the process of manufacturing, or changing the perspective about anything using this process, this tasting?
So my goal, the real goal is actually, to change one's perspective on consumption, generally speaking. And you should absolutely walk away with a more detailed understanding and appreciation for what it takes to make this specific product in front of you, and then hopefully expand that to other items that are within your reach.
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So is your target audience people who think it would be fun to go out for a tasting, or connoisseurs who want to become, brilliant, well-rounded collectors, or buyers who are trying to ethically source for their shops? Or do you have one of these target, what experience are they getting themselves into? Like a really smart one, or a really fun one? Or
I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I think that this particular group, I think the conversation can be tailored toward any of the people you just mentioned. This particular group is the more beginner people who are like, oh, I'd like to learn more about rum, or whatever.
And I notice I have a question, because it's about what you have sort of in mind, like what it sounds like this is you've gotten advice on this before. So what sort of flow have you is sort of already kicking in your brain?
Mm-hmm. So I haven't necessarily gotten advice about the perspective taking part, just so you know. So I'm very open and very excited to hear what everybody thinks. So the flow essentially is, right now I have people sort of filling in the blank with a few questions. So the one one is, for instance, when I think of mezcal or tequila or rum, the people that I think of are blank and blank. So these very sort of open-ended, fill in the blank statements. And then we go through a few of those, and then I put people in breakout rooms, and then they share what they wrote, and then have a few minutes to compare where they're both coming from. And then there is a tasting portion where we talk about how to taste high proof spirits. We don't get into what's in your glass at the moment. It's more just like, okay, here's something in your glass. Let's talk about it. And let's not necessarily talk about prescriptive ways of what things should taste like. It's more your experience of this thing in the glass. And, you know, maybe we haven't done this yet, but like, maybe you could draw a picture of what you're tasting, or, you know, some sort of, or, you know, a poem or whatever you want to do, right? Something that's very open and approachable. And then we put people on this co-learning journey that we've made in mural boards, showing really in-depth, you know, really evocative photos of production processes, and the actual, when we have it, the actual people involved in the production of what's in your glass. Because sometimes we do have the makers and their, you know, their families and their communities. And then, you know, hopefully video testimonials, or somehow, you know, some more interactive bits about how production works, or people speaking about their process. And then that gives people a well-rounded view of what the process is and who the people are and the cultural significance. And then in the end, we come back and do a reflection and talk about, you know, what they've seen and what they've learned. And then we do the reflection about, you know, how would you answer these questions, and why do you think that is? And ideally, you know, this would lead to some discussion about, you know, implicit bias or confirmation bias, or, you know, that sort of stuff. That's something that's I'm working on more. But, you know, for it all to work, it's really about landing this idea of, okay, why haven't I ever thought about this product in this way before? And if I have, like, what have my thoughts been? And how does that line up with what the reality of this product really is, and how it's been presented to me in the past?
Any other clarifying questions? Jump in.
Antoine?
Kate, I would like to ask you, why does it matter to you?
Yeah, so it matters to me because it resonates a lot with, you know, one of my core values, which is equity. And having been personally exposed to the people who make specifically like tequila and mezcal and some of the cultures that it comes from, this is for me, a very tangible example of how systems of inequity work themselves through us. I mean, like, this is going for like in the capitalist system. And so it is, you know, it's a way of empowering people with some privilege, whether that's through, you know, I guess basically through like our ability to consume things, especially things made in parts of the world that have less material wealth and access to capital, and how that can empower people to think more critically about any kind of message that we're presented with, right? And so it's both about actually learning more and empowering people also to just like taste and use their bodies and be embodied in a way, but then also perhaps, you know, to make us mini activists and people who are more grateful for what we have, the resources that we have around us, and more thoughtful in the way that we're interacting with them. Also, I want people to really love mezcal because it's really great.
I have another question. Sounds like you're doing this for a long time already and it works. So what doesn't work?
I actually have only done one pilot at the never done before thing, and it worked pretty well. The thing that the format I think works. The thing that I really, really want to nail is this ability for people to take themselves out of their own particular perspective. And so this is why, yeah, this is the very particular problem I'm focusing on right now. But that said, if anybody, I mean, I'm absolutely open to the other aspects of the workshop too.
So I'm curious, how would you know you'd nailed it? What would you see that would be different? What would they do?
Yeah, so I think, so one person at the end of the last workshop said like, oh my God, I can't believe all I know about this is what advertisements tell me. And that realization in and of itself was very satisfying to me, because, it's a nice realization to know that, oh yeah, right. I mean, I think it's something we all know on some level, but then to have it pointed out in a very poignant way, that made me, I was like, okay, yes, one person walked away with that. And then there was another opportunity to talk about, one person in our group had actually been to Mexico and like had mezcal and tequila at a wedding with her friends there, and got to see it within the community and the cultural importance of it. And what I would love to be able to do is bridge that experience and help people think about like, okay, so I'm probably never going to have that opportunity, but how can I get closer through the resources that I have at my disposal to being informed about this and have an appreciation on some level. So having that kind of fruitful conversation, open conversation would also be great. And if somebody wants to take the next workshop, even better. If somebody wants to talk with me more about, getting deeper into the socioeconomic or environmental issues, then that would also be an amazing sign. If somebody wants a list of responsibly, like in quotes, responsibly made mezcals, then great.
Cool. Anybody else? Or do we have enough?
Yeah, Jerry, I was part of the workshop, they never done before. And I'm not sure if this is okay with the process. So just to bring a testimonial. So I was curious about the workshop. I'm not a spirit drinker myself. I'm more a wine drinker. And I must say that the workshop really opened a new perspective, Kate, on the spirits world. And I really enjoyed the cultural part, because I didn't know that mezcal was so kind of a ritual, it was really, it's not only a spirit, but it's kind of more cultural based, like any other, I was thinking that the Uzu in Greece, the Filuferro in Sardinia, I mean, it's the base, really, it's a basis to talk about other cultural perspectives. So that was really interesting as an idea, as a workshop. So I think that worked really well, the way you did it, Kate. So yeah, just sorry, I just wanted to bring a kind of witness.
All right. Well, then Kate, I would say, thanks, Dove. And Kate, I would say, put yourself on mute, turn off your camera, and we'll see if we can come up with something. So it sounds like we've got this goal about changing perspectives is really the primary thing. And this other question that, thanks so much, Elise, for your question, because it seemed like the cultural appreciation of the context of origin also seemed to sort of jump up in there. And I have this particular question of where did my perspective, where did my previous thoughts come from as a place of origin? So thinking about these purposes, these outcomes in this context with these people, what are the structures that come to mind when we think about changing perspectives? And how might we string them together?
One structure that kind of immediately popped in my mind was so what, now what? Because it kind of leads you to, okay, what do we see? What does it mean? And based on that meaning, okay, what do we do now? So if we talk about, and kind of got the impression that eventually this needs to lead to change behavior, right? So it's not just spirits, it's broader how we look at what we eat and what we drink and how that's changed behavior. So I kind of get a feeling that going through that could give quite an anchor to change that behavior and move towards being more careful and open and investigative about what you eat and drink. But that's something that immediately came to mind, thinking about it. I don't know, anybody else? I got some other stuff, but I don't want to take up all the talking.
Well, and Fishbowl, with makers and things, sure seems
Yeah,
an
Fishbowl.
obvious fit.
Yeah. The Fishbowl or a celebrity interview could also be an option. It depends, I guess, depends a little bit.
Yeah, and something else that also jumps out to me is this could be a particularly interesting case for Mad Tea, right? To offer this series of relatively rapid prompts to sort of probe the space that is, where did this idea come from? And what did you notice now, to sort of get the juices flowing? Does anything else jump out for you guys? Seem like it's relevant? And are there any questions as well about what we're proposing so far?
Yeah, I don't know much about liberating structures, and that's why I'm here. So I just want to justify the fact that I'll be mostly quiet and listening and learning. But if something comes to mind, I'll make sure to say something. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's really a good prompt for us to unpack the structures that we are already sort of throwing out thus far.
Yes.
So have you tried What So What Now before, Baya?
What So What
Say it
Now?
again, please.
What So What Now What? Have you tried that one before?
No, I have not. I have them open here, so I was reading up on them as you guys were mentioning them.
Cool.
One thing, you have to introduce your dog, though. That's mandatory. Oh.
Yes, this is Mel. It's been raining in my country for 23 days straight, which is not normal, and she's terrified of rain. That's why she's here. Yeah.
No.
Cool.
She's going to learn about liberating structures too.
Yeah, so shall I go to quickly go through B3? So the whole idea about what now what is kind of what they call the ladder of inference. I think if you read the structure, they mentioned it as well. It's how we kind of in a structured way go from observation all the way down to, okay, what kind of actions do I need to take with trying to assign some meaning in between. So I use it actually quite a lot because I use it in my work. And the trick here is that you really need to focus people on the specific step of the ladder. So you start with observations. So, and you probably need to help people with that in doing that because they often try to already move to the next step and try to interpret those observations, draw conclusions from them, etc., etc. But really just have them list down observations and from there ask, okay, looking at those observations, okay, why did you write them down? Why were these important? What do they mean for you? and what kind of conclusions can we draw from that? That's then the second step. And once we have that, understand, okay, why we have them, why they're there, why we mention them, and what kind of meaning they have, you can start looking at, okay, given all this, and what we see, okay, what could we do with this? What are our actions? And what makes sense here? But what you often see people is they go straight to actions if you let them, and you miss a lot of context, because if you start from the bottom, you actually kind of could find different, more sensible actions than the one you initially thought of. So yeah, it kind of helps people reflect on things and indeed open their eyes to a wider range of possibilities than they might have by just jumping into actions. I hope that was clear for you a little bit.
It reminds me a lot of Edward de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats strategy to talking about a topic, and also nonviolent communication too, because I work a lot with nonviolent communication, and a lot of the issues we have is people jumping, completely ignoring the observation step and making different types of moralistic judgments about things, and then not reflecting upon them and trying to derive actions or strategies from them. So I like that it seems to me, I might be wrong, it seems to be a simpler, easier to follow framework and super useful. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, like I said, I used a lot, and it's indeed very helpful. Indeed, with opinionated people can be very helpful. Yeah, because you basically force them to take a step back and start justifying, okay, why am I saying this? By going back to the original observation.
Yeah, Antonio, that's what that one. And also another way to unpack it that I found really useful is ordinarily you sort of what I've done, what so what now what was my first love, and I would use the whole group. I would work the whole up the ladder one step at a time with the whole group. So I'd say, what's all of the observations? And then what's all of the meaning of those observations? What's all of the actions that we could do together? But I also found that it works really well if you just say, hey, for every post-it that you fill in, make sure you fill it in with all 3 of these steps, so that every piece of information has gone through this sort of rigorous type of thinking, is a complete thought in some ways, and not just sort of one snapshot of working up the ladder. So that's another way that you might be able to invite people into the type of thinking you're looking for, and still keep things with this sensation of sort of lightness and quickness. Elise, is it all right if I put you on the spot and you unpack the UX Fishbowl for us?
Sure. So with that one, I've done it a couple of different ways and experienced it. So I don't know how it's officially meant to be done without looking it up again. But essentially, there's
awesome. A hot take. I like it.
Yeah, right. There's you have the people that you are interested in gaining their perspective sit in the middle of a circle if you're in person, or they're spotlighted if you're online, and they talk about their experience while everybody listens. And then the people who are listening go off the way we do this in our workshops. They go off into breakouts and talk about what they heard and come back with questions. Right. This is where I'm more curious. This is where I'm more curious. This is what I noticed. And then they ask the questions to the people in the fishbowl. Now, in some forms, like, people can come into and out of the fishbowl depending on what's going on. But in Kate's example, where she's got makers in the room, I wouldn't imagine a taster to go like, hey, I want to be a maker now and share about my experience of your culture, which would be wrong. So, but that bit where you get to like literally just listen to people talk about their thing and then go off and ask questions of it is very much about gaining perspective on somebody else's experience.
Yeah, +5.
And if somebody knows how it's actually literally supposed to be done in this particular context, please jump in.
No, you're spot on. That's it, right? So the basic steps are, I want to jump back out. So most of the time when we get some form of presentation, right? If you think about your big five, like your power, I show you my slide deck and then I say, any questions, right? And normally, very often that question of any questions is met with thundering silence. So what that pattern of bringing people into smaller contexts with the expectation of, hey, you have questions, so reveal them to each other and bring them back here. Right? It's expected that you come back with a question, just helps circumvent and shortcut that process and actually get the information flowing from participant to presenter, or however you want to think about it. And I wonder, I think that one could be really fun, especially talking about as a good spark to that conversation. What is your history? What's your origin? What is your relationship with this drink, which is effectively a cultural artifact, right? So instead of just thinking so much about the process of production that was described, but what is your relationship with this product, and how did it come to be in such a way? So I think that one's cool too. Is there any questions about that?
I have a question in general to the super users. How important is to keep on the structure of the templates and on the timings that the templates describe, or yeah.
I think that's got to matter on who you ask.
Yeah.
Like if you ask me, I think they're called liberating. So, you're free to do what you will.
Yeah, I think it's experience talking here again.
Okay.
If you've never done this and it's the first time you do this, the written down structure is a great tool for you to be guided. As you go into more experience, okay, if I try this is not going to work. So I need to try something else, or it says here that it's 20 minutes, but I know it's not enough. I need to expand that. So as based on your experience, I would say, if you've never done it, go with what's written down, probably your best bet. But then for yourself, and I think that's actually important as a facilitator, get feedback and also reflect for yourself, okay, how did it go and what could I do different next time? And take that learning then into your next step. I think that's the maybe not always satisfactory answer, but I think that's the reality of it all.
Yeah, and I would say even in this call, like I have a different perspective than Robert on that, right? I would say for your first time, like give yourself twice as much time as is sort of advised, and just to give. It's easier to err on, oh, we have too much time, let's cut that off because the vibe is gone in the room, and everybody's busy, trading pictures on Instagram, than it is to go, oh my God, I feel like I'm so stressed out because we don't have enough time to do things. Like that's, yeah. And so, and as well, there's Keith and Henry, the two authors of the book on liberating structures. They disagree on this question as well, right? So from what I understand, Henry is much more of like, no, like you should just 1, 2, 4 all should be an entire day's experience, versus Keith being much more on tempo. So
yeah. One tip is it always takes more time than you think it does, especially online. I find in person it goes a little bit smoother, but online you're always struggling with breakout rooms, people trying to connect to each other because they don't really see each other. So I kind of agree with Jeremy here. Take more time than you think you need, and maybe you need double it. Because that's definitely my experience. Online meetings, your overhead on stuff is quite large, actually.
And then I would say to sort of juxtapose, since
I had a question.
Oh, yeah?
Go ahead,
Oh,
Barbara.
no, I have a comment, but you can go first, Jeremy. It's no problem.
Oh, no, I was going to move on to the celebrity interview as a juxtaposition. But what's your question?
No, it's more of a comment. It might be helpful to Antonia. So one thing that I do when I'm doing different kinds of structures, they're not liberating structures per se, but with I'm a teacher, so when I'm doing them with my students and it's face-to-face, and it's a large group, I ask them to clap if they need more time. So I just go to the center of the room, like, if you want to keep doing this for a little longer, clap.
Mhm.
And that's one thing. And if it's online, I don't really use Zoom. I use this other platform called Butter that allows me to peek into breakout rooms. So I can just send them a message, broadcast a message, and ask them to respond to me if they need more time. And that usually works really well. Or since I'm peeking and I usually have a co-facilitator, we just have a few open and we ask people to hold the thumbs up on the camera. So we start opening them and seeing how many thumbs up are up. And then we give them more time or not, because it's important, as democratic as we can make it, right? Like, so sometimes I think they need more time, but they don't. And they're just like trying to get the conversation, on, when in fact they would very much like to move on to the next step.
Yeah, and it's there. Thank you so much for that. I've never thought of that. Clap if you need more time. So that one suggestion like totally justifies the hosting the space. So thank you. And what I notice is that oftentimes, especially in real life, the prompt 2 more minutes will re-energize a lot of conversations, right? Just making people cognizant of the boundary of time somehow makes it more precious and energized. And so since we talked about the user experience fishbowl, a similar structure is the celebrity interview that Robert brought up. And what I would say is the big difference between you can almost, I think of them almost as identical structures, with the difference that for a user experience fishbowl, that's just sort of a live interaction that we're getting to watch, versus a celebrity interview has much more preparation on the front side, where if I can, I would go to the participants that are going to be observing the celebrity interview, and I would ask them to help me generate questions in advance so that I can sort of have a laundry list of things that I want to talk to this person, this celebrity about, and I want to get information from. And then at the end of that interview, I would still go through effectively the same pattern of splitting people into breakout rooms and asking them to generate additional questions. Barry and Christian of the Liberators, if you guys are familiar with them, they host a regular celebrity interview that is uploaded on their YouTube channel. So if they don't do this move of splitting people into breakout rooms to come back with questions, but they do like literal weeks of collecting questions from community members that they go through and ask on the live session. So that's a really good example to sort of compare. Like if you have the opportunity to ask people, what are your questions for these guys? And if their questions are interesting or valid, then the celebrity interview could be cool. My sense is for this setting, I would think a Ux Fishbowl is a little bit more effective. But those are the sort of 2 different flavors on that. And did I miss anything, or is there anything you guys want to add to that min spec explanation?
No, that seems to me. Yeah, if you want to indeed see example, then checking some of the liberating structures. Actually, they are good. If you want to know more about the liberating structures, their blog posts are really, really helpful.
No doubt. Most of my learning journey took place with them. So
Yes.
Shout out to Barry and Christian. Whoop, whoop. So then the last structure that sort of came up in our rapid fire was Mad Tea Party. And Mad Tea Party is one of, has anybody found an effective way of doing this one online? Because I find it really hard. So the pattern of Mad Tea Party is one of those things that in real life, like in a live setting is very easy. Effectively, people pair up and they respond to a prompt in basically 1 minute per person. So, and you would use 10 different prompts. In the classic version of Mad Tea Party. So you would just say, it's probably better if I link to the doc that has the invitations. But you would respond in pretty quick succession in a one-on-one interaction, each time with a different person, to a very simple prompt. And then you would just continue going. So if you've ever tried impromptu networking, that similar setup of one-on-one short interaction is very energizing and helps to get a lot of energy flowing and a lot of information at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
You could do it with something like Welo, like a custom designed Welo space where you've got your Mad Tea part, and then you go over into their cultural landscape for the makers focus thing, and then you come back to the action board with the list of responsible mezcal places or something. Kind of fascinating.
Yeah, Welo could for sure work. Definitely.
Yeah, the one time I've done it was in person. It was Barry and Christian actually, and they made 2 concentric circles and facing each other basically. And after each question, I think the outer ring moved one person to the left or right, whatever direction you want to take it. So kind of rotate the circle every time. So, but I've never seen it effectively done online indeed, because you need to be really quick in changing the pairs. So not seen a tool that really does that well, but they exist. Cool.
And in the Google Doc, there is a link to an explanation of Mad Tea Party. It's one of the structures you will not find listed on the website because it's liberating structure and development, which is another can of worms I'm not going to explain at all. But on the Google Doc in the storyboard, you can find a link to the Mad Tea Party, which I will say is a very great resource because it has a lot of like really great prompts and beginnings of invitations. So check it out. So we've got some structures on the offer. How might we put them together? Like just mash these 3 up into one thing that sort of tracks. And I notice I failed to ask Kate how much time she wanted to allocate towards this sort of debrief and perspective trading. 90 minutes for the whole thing or for the perspective taking? For the whole thing. Okay. Yeah.
It's going to be challenging. Yeah. I probably start with something like impromptu networking. I would say something in that area. You could also do that with a Mad Tea, if you find a way to do it. But something in that area that quickly connects people, where they can quickly share some information, so preconceived notion of what they're doing. Yeah, then probably
Maybe after their first tasting. So
yeah, probably would do it that way. I think. Just to get it all together, then have that impromptu network, their experiences, their initial impressions, Ux Fishbowl, get those people in, and then probably W3. So what's structure? And that might be challenging in 90 minutes. So no, that should actually be quite. You'll have some time to play with, I guess. Yeah. But you have some time to play with, I think. Good work. Just off the top of my head, I will need to really draw that to see how it works, but I think you can play a little with the Ux Fishbowl time in a year to see how it fits. Then where I'm at this moment, I don't know if people who have other ideas.
Yeah, what lands for me is especially that initial question that Kate brought in. So when I think of X product, what is my what are the people, or what comes to mind? So I think that's a really good invitation for that impromptu networking round, to just sort of say, hey, you know, what are not only my biases or associations, but what are the associations that are just sort of in the room in a relatively fun, interactive way. And then as you sort of offer them this bevy of experiences around, hey, where does this thing come from? Landing on a Ux Fishbowl still seems like a solid way of sort of coming out of this sort of online multimedia experience and making it a little bit more live, right? Making it a little bit more human than I say just, even though I've never seen at all what she's put together, right? But that makes it a little bit more live and real time. And then entering into this space of like, all right, so, you know, based on what you've shared, what are you most curious about? Could be a particularly good invitation, if I do say so myself, around generating additional questions, right? Just the assumption that now that you know more, there's something that you're surely more curious about. You know, just bring that up and enter that into the interactive space. And then thinking about this sort of goal around of perspective taking, I come back to, I think, Mad Tea Party, however you could figure out to do that, having a series of shorter interactions, or even actually, now that I think about it, even a spiral journal would be really good for this, right? To offer this myriad of different prompts to trigger this reflection about, hey, how was I looking at it? How do I look at it now? Where did these ideas came from? You know, what were the associations? You know, hey, how did they get into my brain, for the love of God? And I think a very important question is, how did they influence my relationship with this thing, right? Not just how was I looking at them, but then how did I behave as a result of that? You know, how did I think? How did I imagine they saw the world? You know, what were the judgments that popped up? These are some of the prompts that, in a spiral journal format, and spiral journals, pretty simple. You draw a spiral for a couple minutes to just sort of ground yourself, and then you offer a prompt that people write and journal their own reflection to. And you can go through in, you know, 15 minutes, you could offer these 10 different prompts, perhaps those in the same sort of feel of Mad Tea Party, but in a much more sort of still and quiet space. And then I might think that what, so what, now what is actually a good way to land, like to debrief the whole experience of, hey, this was what I noticed in the reflection the whole way along, right? This is what I came with, this is what I discovered, and this is how it might influence how I'm in the world, sort of, now that all things are all said and done.
I have a more tech, I'm so sorry.
No, go for it, please.
No, because I swear to God, I don't work for Butter, but I have a more technical thing that can work for the Mad Tea Party, because I also know that in Butter now, in the breakout rooms, you can pin a person to the room and then reshuffle so that they get different pairs. And that could be a possibility.
Word.
So yeah,
we got to tell Anna, let her know we're shouting out Butter. Maybe we can get some licenses going here.
Sounds like I need to host a Butter workshop. Somebody want to come host a Butter workshop for me in the Mid Innovation community?
I can totally help with that. If you want to, I'll show you around.
Absolutely. I'll send you my email.
Making friends. That's good times. So Kate, Antonia.
Now, there is another new platform that's called Seshboard that will that we used in the Never Done Before, and it has this feature, turn to your neighbor. So basically, you are all in the same room, you do turn to your neighbor and you talk with the person next, but I'm not sure how it's good in reshuffling, etc. So maybe, I don't know, I never tried it in improv networking, so I'm not sure if it's going to work. Maybe the one Baya said it's better. I'm putting the link there.
Cool.
There's another one too called Gather, which I love because you have to create an 8-bit version of you and you explore different worlds. And when it's similar, I think, to Willow. When you get close to someone, you start seeing the person. And then you actually have settings for that where you just move your avatar around and you sit in different tables. It's really nice. Kids love it. Adults too. I love it. And I'm old.
Oh, then it must be awesome if kids love it. All right.
You
Well, I
share
think
the link, Baya? Yeah, thank you.
sweet. Well, it looks like we've got ourselves a prototype of a string, right? We're jumping in with some impromptu networking, going on an interactive adventure, multimedia adventure with a Ux Fishbowl, coming out of that with some form of reflection or spiral journal or impromptu or mad tea party, and then sticking the landing with what, so what, now what, as a way to anchor the reflection. And with that being said, I would like to ask Kate to come back in and give us the game. What did she take away from this? And yeah.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, let me spill out all of my appreciation to everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you for, for the minimalist super user suggestions, and then also for the optimist, like your clarifying questions, because I definitely benefited from those. So thank you, everybody. It was super helpful. So yes, I think it's always nice to hear, of course, like, everybody likes to hear something that aligns with something they were already thinking. And there was, I think for me, the most encouraging part is that there are structures like the fishbowl, or especially Mad Tea, that do put some more structure around things that were floating around in my head. And so I can't wait to explore those more. Especially the idea of the prompts and the invitations, and definitely like looking into the different, it'll be interesting in a long process to experiment with technology, because of course, users. But thank you for the suggestions there as well. The one question that I had, if that's all right, was about, where'd my question go? I think it was about, where'd you go? Oh, so with Mad Tea, just to clarify, so when you're moving around, is there any discussion or reflection upon your response to the prompts, or is it just, you're just stating your response to the prompts? Just stating. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, if you're looking for more of like the central comeback and cross sharing across conversations, that would be, I think, the utility of something like what, so what, now what, to really bring all of those threads together in a shared experience and go, hey, all right. Oh, that's what happened in all of those different conversations that I didn't necessarily get to take part in.
Okay, cool.
When I've seen Mad Tea used, it's very much about energizing and getting people's voices out into very much like impromptu networking, but much faster and goofier. In a good way. It's very do-si-do kind of. Yeah. Everybody round circle, here we go.
Yeah, exactly. And the from the physical space, like the sense of like shouting, having to shout just to be heard over this cacophony of conversations happening around you. Yeah.
All right, awesome, thank you.
And so, Kate, I have a question that puts you on the spot. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I am not going to use any of this information whatsoever. to 5 being, oh no, you have just designed my workshop and I'm going to use that. Where do you think this sort of falls from your perspective?
This is a solid 4 for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, the beauty of these structures is that you can slot them in and out, right? And so, and you know, they are, if to a certain degree, as was already discussed, like plug and play. So yeah, I can absolutely slot in. I mean, what, so what, now what is like kind of a no-brainer. I was like, Kate, how did you not think about that already? But it's so perfect. And one of the reasons I didn't is because I myself glossed over the so what part. So, which is to me the most important meaty part of that exercise. So, so yeah, I think right away I can use these things. Thank you.
Cool. Well, and then as a bonus round, right, as a bonus structure, the one we didn't even talk to is the one we've just completed, which is wise crowds, right? So this is wise crowds. The other give and get help structure in liberating structures, not just troika, but wise crowds. Anything else? That was the party, guys. So
Right. I love your idea of handing people like the list of responsible makers at the end, like a super clear action pack. That's awesome.
Righteous. And Kate,
Also
you got the
delicious.
link to the doc that we were working on, right? Cool.
I did.
Awesome.
Bye.
Well, my name's Jeremy.
Well,
Thanks for your
you
time,
guys
attention, and energy. No, I'm closing the call right now.
don't close the call
Maya.
because you have it scheduled until 2, right? To my time for another 45 minutes or not? Because in my calendar is showing until later.
Well, you can keep going.
Because
for sure, if you've got a question,
if you have
we can schedule
times,
another
I
session.
need help.
Mhm.
Awesome, because I'm hosting a session on Thursday that's very, very much still a work in progress. I'm brand new to facilitation officially because I've been a teacher for like 13 years, but kind of doing things intuitively. So I started attending tons and tons and tons of workshops September last year. And I immediately noticed that a lot of people, a lot of presenters, a lot of facilitators would sometimes try to do something in a session that would just very clearly fail. And I love it when things fail, because when things fail in my classroom, we just stop and go like, oh my God, that did not work. So let's talk about it. Let's see how we can make it better. Let's have a laugh. And these people know, they just plowed through. And that was really weird to me. And everyone in the room, it was really clearly failing. And everyone was just pretending that everything was okay. So that threw me off. And it got me in a headspace of like, why do we do this? Why don't we just take a moment? Why don't we have something, a strategy to debrief an activity that didn't work and maybe learn, and then that being the teachable moment. And because of that, I decided to put together a facilitation session. It's called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with the good crossed out. So it's just the bad and the ugly. And the idea is for us to get together and talk about failure, be a little bit more vulnerable with each other, talk about facilitation mishaps, and then that's not the goal, but if we have time, then maybe we can come up with solutions. But the whole point is like, let's just think about these things and acknowledge these things that we haven't really been. So I would love help with that.
I'm thinking. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Do you want to approach this with Jeremy? Do another wise crowd cycle?
Yeah, I think we should just run through wise crowds all over again, rather than getting all loosey-goosey in our pants. So let me just make sure. So min specs. So it sounds like the context for your sort of place for this session sounds like an open invite event. And where in sort of retrospect of your experience of having seen these sort of crashed structures, or crashed execution, and the sense of cognitive dissonance of, why don't we just talk about how horrible that thing just went, right? Which is, I feel like, can so vividly describe so much of my life, right? Why don't we just talk about how horrible that just went? Okay, so that's sort of, and that's the purpose, right? Is to sort of create a space and an opportunity to have a conversation about, yeah, there's two things that I'm not quite clear on. Do you want to have a conversation about why don't we talk about how bad things go as they're going, or do you want to have a conversation about how bad things have gone? There's a nuance
about how bad things have gone. I even thought about doing this activity as an icebreaker, just like great ideas for workshops and facilitations, but only wrong answers, to get us thinking about that, because I'm honestly just curious. Am I just the annoying, picky person that's seeing this, or is everyone seeing what I'm seeing? Is the emperor naked or not? You know, that's kind of like, and I think he is, and I think everyone is seeing it, but no one's talking about it. So talk about problems that they have experienced in facilitations as spectators, or as participants, or as hosts.
Oh, yeah. I've had many sessions where things didn't exactly go as I planned, or didn't get the response that I expected, and I had to change my mind midway through the session. So it happens, but you need to be cognizant about it. But okay, yeah, I don't think this is a unique experience. I need from at least my perspective. But yeah.
So I'd be curious, because in terms of where you would take that from a workshop perspective or an exercise perspective, because there are many places where you can fail. Like you can fail in an environment like this one, or if you didn't talk about it, that would be sad. That would be lack of experience and confidence, right? As opposed to an environment where you go in and you've been paid to deliver on an explicit set of bullet points by a business. And if you don't achieve the things that are on that list, and you don't have a backup plan for achieving it, you know, the failure consequences are much, much higher. And, you know, I did a workshop once, and I was with a group who was just pissed off to be in the workshop. Like the whole time, they were just angry that they were being asked to run better meetings. They were just like, this is not my job. I don't know. So like the whole thing was just a train wreck. And stopping to reconfigure that, knowing that it was a train wreck, meant that I had to bail on what I promised the sponsor to do. There was no way I could have done it because they were hostile. But so those kinds of experiences, like the experience of like no, I've made a big promise that I have to fulfill, and it's not working, versus like, hey, we're trying things out as a learning collective, versus, you know, like that I guess there's a big range. And I've seen workshops like the one you talked about, like, hey, we've got failure moments, what did we do to recover? Done a couple different ways, but they all seem to come from this perspective that you can always recover. Like you can always either have the confidence or the self-awareness or the permission to change it. So I rambled, but is there anything in there that's the one that you're trying to grab at?
I love what you just said, because that's the problem that I'm having with setting it up right now, is just like, do we always have space for that? And I'm thinking that I don't know how, but I think we can create that. I worked for many years as a teacher inside Fiat, the automobile company. And the environment there was very much different from a classroom. And many times I would come with a lesson plan and then get there and they're like, yeah, no, that's not happening. And just do something else. And then it was like, I don't even know what you need. Like, how can I improvise? And then us having that space of our like, hey, I have the expertise and I do want to help you, but it kind of has to be both ways. So I've had the experience of being in a high pressure scenario and it working, where I just put myself as a human being and I'm here to help you and I want to help you achieve the goals that you have. But at the same time, now that's a curveball and I can't just pretend that it didn't happen. So like how to create space for that, how to kind of force companies, how to kind of force a employer to understand that if that happens, then the best way I can help you is to acknowledge what is happening and change course, including everyone, not just me being the dictator and this is what we're going to do now. Like, no, like completely changed everything. I know how to do it kind of intuitively, but I do not know how to structure it, explain it, and I'm struggling with that right now.
So if I get you by it sounds like you're really sticking the purpose or your intended goal is sort of coming clear, that it's not just the conversation about what goes wrong, but you'd actually, I get a sense that you'd like to move towards how do we create space for this reflective and recovery mode, right? Okay. And then just to make clear the participants, who are we talking about in this sort of group of volunteers? Is this going to be for facilitators, by facilitators?
No idea. It's an open event for yeah, it's an open event, so I have no idea.
God only knows. All right, good. Then you might have the opportunity to do the thing you want to talk about. Right? Yeah. And what could be a better learning experience than that? How long did you want to take for this workshop?
1 hour.
1 hour. Cool. All right, man. Okay. Any other clarifying questions?
Maybe what's the worst that could happen?
That's the beauty of it. The worst that could happen is actually ideal, because then it brings a conversation about it. Like, it's experimental. Honestly, at this point, I cannot think of a really, really bad case scenario. Only if people start getting aggressive with each other, which I don't think is going to happen. If it fails, then we have a conversation about it.
Well, then you have to exemplify it, right? Which is what could be better.
Like the fuck up nights. Yeah, the fuck up format. Yeah.
Yes, exactly like that.
Okay. Well, I think I got enough to riff on. So Baya, I will invite you to mute yourself, turn off your camera, and we'll chop it up. So hold on, let me get my invitation again. So what structures come to your mind to address this case, and how might we string them together?
Was
Well,
one
for
that
me, yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. The one that seems sort of like it would be totally fun to start with is the really negative one. Is it TRIZ?
yes,
Where you break them into groups and you have them each like, what is the worst possible scenario that you can imagine or that you've experienced, and like get all of that out there as the thing to play with.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was one that immediately came to mind, is indeed going from the idea of how can we create the worst possible experience for people, or the worst way to organize it. The nice thing about TRIZ, of course, is that it is basically two-step, right? Its first one sounds really funny because hey, create this destruction, we can do whatever. But then you turn it around and say, okay, looking at all those list of things that we can do to make this horrible, what are we actually doing today? And what can we stop? And that actually makes, so it's reflective in that sense. And it actually also drives actually quite simple changes, because stopping something is a lot easier than coming up with something totally new. So we know we're doing this, and we know this has a bad result. Okay, why are we doing this? So
I think it would be fascinating if you take it and you flip the prompt a little bit too. Because
Mhm.
like often when we talk about TRIZ, it's like, what could we do to make this fail?
Yeah.
And what are we doing that looks like it? But what if you were to flip the prompt and have it be, what do the groups do that make me fail? Right? Like, because half the time when we don't recover as facilitators is because we don't believe we have agency to do so.
Yep.
Believe
Yeah.
that the group is not doing what we expected them to do or something.
Yeah.
So like, what are they doing to make us fail?
Yeah.
What did we actually experience like that? And it's like, well, what would you do differently if you were in that situation? Might be an interesting way to string it.
Yeah, that could work too. I think it's important to prevent that they end up in a situation where they try to change other people's behavior, because that's not going to work. It's their own thing. What they need to do. So it's fine if you take that approach from the group, but then bring it back to things that that they can influence. So that's the only caution that I would put in that. But I think that's also a great idea. It's kind of which approach you take.
I guess one of the questions I would have about it, or one of the things I'd be cautious about, is that when a lot of what TRIZ can bring up is ways to prepare.
Mhm.
Right. So, oh, this could fail because I didn't come in with a clear enough plan, or I didn't plan enough time, or I didn't, screen my participants well enough, or all of these things that you would have done in advance to like prevent the failure. But in this case, I think these workshop scenarios are ones where the facilitator walks in thinking they've done all of that. And it still goes off the rails.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's what comes to mind as you bring in this question of what is it that they do that makes me fail. What I like about how subversive that is because it invites people into the victim state, number one.
Mhm.
And then which the polar opposite of that is the creative state. So the turn of perspective that I think is interesting in the victim state, it is 9 whys, right? So what is it? Why do I care so much, right? So what they do this, why does that make me go all the time, right? What is it that makes me so paralyzed in the face of that? Could be a very interesting inquiry. And then, yeah.
Is there, it sounds like there's only an hour, but is there some way to engage with some kind of improv activity that would get people really in the space, in them, like actually physically in the mindset? Some of the, like we've done, workshops and never done before, for instance, where like you literally just set people up to fail in these kind of circumstances. So is there anything in liberating structures that would lend itself to that?
For sure, that would be improv prototyping. So I would say, I don't know if I want to say this out loud, especially since this is being recorded. I am going to upload this, but this is like the closest you're going to get with role playing, right? So it's a much more playful version, I think, invitation into this idea of role play. The way that tends to work with in the classic one. So this is great. I'm actually going to try and explain the one I've never actually facilitated. So I've never tried to use improv prototyping, and I've never tried to use panarchy. So improv prototyping, if I'm not mistaken, offers a setup and invites a pair or a group to then improvise or do the role play prototyping, obviously, in front of a larger audience, and then it invites the audience to then split off into subgroups and do their own role play or do their own improv set, riffing on the scene and varying as they see fit. And then if I'm not mistaken, coming back into a shared space of going, hey, this is what we tried and that worked pretty well, more or less. If anybody's got a addition, please fill me in. But I think that's the general gist of it.
I've never done this one as well. So you know more than I do this one.
I've seen it once.
Okay.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit, thinking about it for this context of like what they do if you go for your international facilitator certification. Like they throw you into a simulation and you have to like not mess up consensus and inclusion and all of those kinds of things while they're being rude to you.
Oh yeah. I know I had a colleague who crashed on her first time out of the gate with this, and I can totally understand why after you describe it that way, right? Yeah. So I think given the constraint of time that Baya talked about, I think TRIZ to me seems the one that really is probably the cleanest to execute within an hour. Although I really like this move of like, no, be a victim, and then like how to claw your way into a creative space. But I think I would have to wrestle with that a little more.
Is there a structure that helps people co-create like mantras or strategies, or I mean, because if you really identify with the victim state of failure, and then you work together to go, hold on a second, we still have agency in every one of those moments. We just need each other's backs spiritually, and also perhaps scripts in our mind, like sticky note that says, if things go wrong, say this, or something like a tool. Is there one that helps co-creation of mini tools like that?
Yeah, there is one. What's it called again? You create a quadrant, right? With the
so there's two structures that come to mind. Are you talking about critical uncertainties?
that one.
Yeah, critical uncertainties. I was one of the first thoughts I had. It's a little long for an hour time box.
That's the only problem, yeah.
That's tricky. Critical uncertainties is kind of like a mini scenario planning. You dream up two different axes. What is the most critical factor that causes me to crash? What's the most uncertain factor that causes me to crash? And then based on those two axes in a 2x2 matrix, you have 4 different scenarios where distributing these critical and uncertain factors. Then you would describe the scenario in your quadrant. So what do I see, hear, and notice? How do I know if I get dropped in off of a helicopter and I land here, what's going to be eyes wide open, head on a swivel? What am I going to see? So how do I tell that I'm here? And then I would brainstorm coping strategies. So I can't do anything to influence the norms of the context, but I'm there. What do I do to keep myself alive and sane and healthy and happy? And then there's some analysis that you can do of those coping strategies. So that might come towards this goal you're talking about, co-creating some form of mantras. What also comes to mind, and I can't believe that I'm only thinking of it now, considering your background, Elise, is Tiny Monsters. Tiny Monsters is also a really good one, I think, for this setting, right? So in the scenario that I'm confronted with crashing in front of the group, what are the thoughts that are in my head? Brene Brown talks about these gremlins, right? So, what is it that is happening that I'm so afraid of? And then Tiny Monsters also has a sort of arc that enables you to sort of switch your relationship with that gremlin, right? To have it going from being such a scary face to figure out a way to make friends with it. In what ways might you be confused or misinterpreting this signal, and how might you look at it differently? So I think though that also seems very salient in, so, what is this negative thought that I'm going, oh no, oh no, oh no about, and how do I change my relationship to it? Could be very salient towards creating this space where I can then acknowledge the thing that's in front of me and figure out a way to, like, all right, well, you're here now, what do we do about it? Anybody got any ideas, rather than, no, that's not happening, nobody say that is happening, because otherwise I'd be crushed to death.
Those tiny monsters, could tiny, it must be in development. I've experienced Pixies. Is it kind of like the Pixies one?
So Tiny Monsters is, I did it before at the one at, so Tiny Monsters has you first draw a set of sort of gremlins, right? Start off with some basic shapes and then add like claws and eyes, make draw these little creatures. And then in almost a separate / parallel exercise, you would come up with a laundry list of negative thoughts effectively. And then you would start pairing those negative thoughts to the drawings and go, which enables a meta perspective of taking the thought in my head and anthropomorphizing it onto a separate entity that I can then create a more distance, and equanimity is the word concept that comes to mind, right? I can have a more balanced relationship with that thing that's there and that is not necessarily me.
So do you think you would sub that, you could sub that almost for the TRIZ in this case too? Then you could do either or. You wouldn't want to do both.
I'm trying
necessarily.
I think there's an interesting design challenge. The difference that I think between when I think about Tiny Monsters and TRIZ is very much about like what I see on the outside world, right? So what is the behaviors that cause chaos and suckage in general, versus Tiny Monsters is very much about what's happening on the inside world. Like, what do I experience that causes internal turbulence? So there's a nice sort of juxtaposition and sort of whole picture view that could come from putting those in relationship with each other, right? So as I think about the behaviors and activities that create really bad, horrible, like cringy outcomes, right? Park those before completing the arc of TRIZ. Just come up with the first step of what are the activities, and then, all right, reflect what goes on inside of me as I'm seeing all of that stuff, right? And then, all right, if I can shift that relationship of what goes on inside of me, then, this is getting a little like, I'm really deconstructing these things, so bear with me. But then appreciative interviews as well, and the concept of appreciative inquiry. Like, so having this new relationship, what's the relationship I'd like to have with this little gremlin? Like, what could be the most loving, accepting, and just charitable relationship we could have to one another? If I can envision that future from that perspective, like of that relationship, what are the solutions that then pop up into the here and now that help me actually get there? So yeah, that I noticed that gives me a lot of juice, right? That is a very fun space where we're using the structures as just micro elements and then bolting them together in such a way. That could be really cool, but that would require, even for me, right, I would have to do a lot more homework to figure out, all right, how exactly can I go step by step into that?
I bet that'd be fun.
So if you're not going to use this, let us know, so we can throw a party.
Well, I'm using it. And the good thing too, it's experimental. So if I fail, I can just share with you guys what went wrong, and that's okay.
Most definitely, which is great that you bring that up. It would be my my absolute fantasy for this space would be to have you come back and share with us the story of how this thing that we've brainstormed together actually fared in the real world, so that we can sort of learn from it together with you via your experience. So that would be awesome.
Thank you. Can
All
I say
right.
something really quickly?
Yeah.
Oh my
Please.
God, everyone wants to go and I'm like, no, you're I'm so sorry. I apologize. It's just that when I heard Elise talking about what I wrote down, Elise, and this might be a total misrepresentation of what you said, collectively coming up with strategies for coping. Mantras you mentioned. I think, unfortunately, nonviolent communication has been commodified to something that became very utilitarian. But if you actually look at the principles behind it and the fact that it's based on the principle that we want to give, we want to connect, we want to empathize, that can be extremely useful. Like there hasn't been one occasion that I've tried to use the principles and the ideas, not necessarily the structure of nonviolent communication, that it has failed me yet. And that might be useful to you. Nonviolent communication, and then again, I preach the word of NVC to most people I talk to. It's just because how helpful it's been, like especially being in a country that is so divided right now, teaching teenagers and adults and people with so many different backgrounds, and there being so much possibility for conflict. That's been really, really helpful. And that's one of the ideas why I decided to do this, is like, why are we being so violent towards ourselves and each other to the point where we are ignoring things that are actually happening? As for your suggestions, I really want to thank you. And I'm even going to thank you in the presentation itself, because I was waiting. This is happening on Thursday, and I should not be saying this because again, it's recorded, but I haven't, it's not done. It was open and all my friends are freaking out for me. They're like, how is it not ready yet? I was like, I don't know, man, I still need something and I'm looking for it and I'm going to leave it open until the last minute. And this was it. So guys, you're awesome. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you.
Super. High fives for life. Bam. So thank you guys for your time, attention, and energy. This has been a nourishing experience for me. I hope it was rad for you. We're going to do it again next week, and the week after that, the week after that. I hope to also see you guys. If anybody's coming with me to Unbridled, that's on Thursday. The Liberating Structures gathering. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to tell a teeny tiny story, but never you mind. So I got to go pick up my kids.
That sounds
Safe
fun.
travels.
We have an event on Wednesday too, if anybody's looking for something that's way over scheduled and full of scientists. So
Okay.
you're welcome to join that one as well. But thank you.
All right.
Thanks for hosting,
Awesome.
Jeremy.
Thanks, everyone.
My
Yes.
pleasure. Safe travels. Gushes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.